Look closely at the skyline of a 19th-century metropolis. What is missing? In an era supposedly powered by crude coal and steam, where are the plumes of black smoke? More importantly, where are the endless webs of cables that choke our modern cities? History books tell us these people lived in the dark, yet their photographs reveal magnificent boulevards illuminated by a source of power we have been trained to ignore completely. Observe the intricate metalwork crowning the roofs of grand hotels, government buildings, and cathedrals. Architects dismiss them as mere ornamentation or simple lightning rods, but engineering logic dictates that form follows function. Why would a primitive society invest millions in gold-plated copper spires if they served no utilitarian purpose? Documents buried in patent archives suggest these were not decorations, but active collectors of atmospheric energy, harvesting the etheric field directly from the air. This was a civilization connected by a global wireless grid, free from the shackles of fossil fuels and monthly meters. Yet, as the 20th century dawned, this technology was systematically dismantled. The copper was stripped, the domes were grounded, and the knowledge was relegated to the realm of pseudoscience. We traded infinite clean energy for a metered, wired existence. Today, we peel back the layers of this forgotten history to reveal the truth. To understand this lost grid, we must acknowledge a physical reality often omitted from standard textbooks. The Earth acts as a massive spherical capacitor. The ground is negative, the ionosphere is positive. Between them lies an atmospheric potential gradient averaging 100 volts for every meter of elevation. The builders of the Old World understood this fundamental physics. They did not build high merely for prestige, they built high to access the atmospheric current. The physics is indisputable. For every meter you ascend from the ground, the electrical potential increases by approximately 100 volts. A cathedral spire reaching 100 meters effectively touches a 10,000-volt potential source. Modern science dismisses this as mere static electricity, useless and dangerous. But the ancients viewed it differently. Their architecture was designed with specific conductive materials, brick, iron, and copper, to create a continuous, low-resistance path for this atmospheric charge to flow downwards. Analyze the materials of these colossal structures. We find a distinct prevalence of red brick and quartz, materials that possess known piezoelectric properties when placed under immense structural pressure. Combined with iron structural bracing and expansive copper roofing, these buildings functioned essentially as gigantic batteries or macrocapacitors. They were not merely houses of worship or government administration, they were machines. The Tartarian power plants were silent, vibration-free, and harmonically tuned to the Earth's natural resonance. Nikola Tesla is often credited with inventing wireless power transmission, but a controversial theory proposes he was merely re-engineering a pre-existing ancient technology. His famous Wardenclyffe Tower bears a striking structural and functional resemblance to the obelisks and towers found in Greco-Roman architecture worldwide. Tesla openly stated his goal was to tap into the very wheelwork of nature. Was he trying to invent something new, or simply reactivate a dormant grid? Examine the archival photographs of the great World's Fairs in the late 1800s. Cities like St. Louis and Chicago were illuminated by millions of electric bulbs, consuming megawatts of power that officially did not exist yet. We are told this was powered by temporary coal generators, yet no massive smokestacks are visible in the panoramic shots. The light emitted is a brilliant, steady white glow, characteristic of atmospheric ionization, not the flickering yellow of primitive filaments. Consider the fireplaces found in these mansions. They are disproportionately large, yet remarkably they show no evidence of soot, chimney smoke, or carbon buildup. A controversial theory proposes these were never intended for burning wood. Instead, they likely housed radium or mercury-based devices. When energized by the building's collection grid, these elements would ionize the immediate atmosphere, providing both radiant heat and a therapeutic ambient glow that modern incandescent bulbs completely fail to replicate. Expanding our view to the macro scale, examine the aerial footprints of the star forts scattered across Europe and the Americas. Historians insist these are purely defensive bastions. However, viewed from above, their geometry is strikingly identical to modern frequency oscillators and magnetotrons. Surrounded by water, a powerful dielectric medium, these massive earthworks appear to function as the harmonic nodes of the grid, amplifying and tuning the signal transmitted between the cathedral towers and the obelisks. Water played a critical functional role in this global circuit. The elaborate fountains and extensive canal systems of the 19th century were likely not merely aesthetic landscaping. Water is a programmable liquid crystal and a superb conductor. By shaping water flow through specific geometric patterns, cymatics, the ancients could potentially tune the frequency of the etheric energy. These plazas were not just public spaces, they were grounding terminals, ensuring the stability of the wireless charge. Why destroy such a utopia? The answer lies in economics and control. Free energy cannot be metered. You cannot attach a billing cycle to the atmosphere. As the industrial financiers of the 20th century consolidated power, their monopoly depended entirely on scarcity. Coal, oil, and wired electricity created a profitable dependency. The wireless grid represented total autonomy. Therefore, a campaign of architectural lobotomy began. The conductors were severed, and the truth was buried. Walk through any major historic city and observe the ground floors. Why are windows cut in half by the sidewalk? Why do so-called basements possess full-sized doors and ornate details? Standard history attributes this to raising the street level. However, the mud flood theory suggests a cataclysmic inundation of soil buried the lower operational levels of these power plants. These submerged floors likely housed the massive chemical batteries and grounding mechanisms essential for the grid. Inside the cathedrals, the massive pipe organs served a purpose far beyond religious hymns. When air is forced through these immense pipes, specific resonant frequencies are generated. Sound is physical vibration. By playing specific chords, the operators could vibrate the quartz-laden masonry of the structure, maximizing the piezoelectric effect. The entire building would hum, resonating with the atmospheric frequency, amplifying the collection of energy. It was acoustic engineering applied to electrical generation. Before we examine the specific patents that prove this technology existed, take a moment to support this archive. If you believe history is written by the victors and rewritten to hide the truth, verify your subscription to this channel. By liking this transmission, you help the algorithm surface these lost truths to others who are still asleep. Join our investigation as we now turn our attention to the undeniable paper trail left behind. Critics often demand proof. It exists in the archives of the U.S. Patent Office. Look at Patent 1,540,998, filed by Herman Plausen in the 1920s. It explicitly describes a system for converting atmospheric static electricity into usable current. Plausen's balloons and towers were not science fiction. They were based on principles established decades earlier. He wasn't inventing a novelty. He was trying to patent the remnants of a technology that was rapidly being outlawed. To comprehend how this worked, we must revisit the concept of the luminiferous ether. Until the early 20th century, mainstream physics accepted that an invisible, all-pervading medium connected all matter. The wireless grid relied on manipulating this medium. When modern science discarded the ether theory in favor of Einsteinian relativity, we didn't just change a formula, we effectively deleted the operating system required to run this ancient hardware, rendering it useless to modern minds. The narrative of the Great Expositions contains a glaring logistical impossibility. We are told these neoclassical masterworks were built of temporary staff, plaster, and hemp, only to be demolished months later. Yet photos of their demolition often reveal massive steel frames and red brick cores. Why build with the permanence of stone only to destroy it? Perhaps these were not new constructions, but ancient legacy cities, renovated for a final display before being ritually destroyed. There is a haunting discrepancy in scale visible in 19th century photography. The architecture features archways and doors 20 feet high, built for giants, while the inhabitants are people of our size, riding primitive horse-drawn buggies. They look like children wandering through the ruins of a superior civilization. The theory of the inheritors suggests that the population of the 1800s did not build these cities, they merely dug them out and re-inhabited them. Scrutinize the earliest photos of so-called telegraph poles. In many images from the 1850s and 60s, these poles stand lining the streets, complete with multiple crossbars and ceramic insulators, yet they carry absolutely no wires. Historians claim the wires are too thin to appear on film. However, the shadows of thin tree branches appear perfectly. Could these poles originally have been local field resonators, wireless repeaters that were later crudely retrofitted with cables? The keystones of this technology were the omnipresent copper spheres and urns topping the spires. We are told they are decorative. However, anecdotal reports from demolition crews mention finding liquid mercury inside these vessels. In ancient Vedic texts, mercury is the fuel of the vimanas, or flying machines. Were these roof finials actually mercury vortex engines? Spinning mercury creates powerful electromagnetic fields. This wasn't steampunk, this was advanced electrogravitic engineering disguised as masonry. This energy grid did more than just illuminate, it likely healed. Modern medicine treats the body chemically, but the ancients treated it energetically. Look at the magnificent sanatoriums of the 19th century. They weren't merely for fresh air, they were charging stations. The atmospheric energy created a high-frequency ionization field that inhibited disease and promoted cellular regeneration. We didn't just lose free power, we lost a golden age of human longevity and vitality. Perhaps the most disturbing evidence is found in the ruins themselves. Investigate the so-called melted castles of Europe. The brickwork has been turned into vitrified stone, dripping like candle wax. Standard fire cannot achieve the temperatures required to melt masonry into glass. This implies the grid was not merely disabled, it was overloaded. Was there a war using directed energy weapons? A plasma discharge event? The evidence suggests a technological apocalypse ended this era. Following this cataclysm, a new educational paradigm was introduced to manage the survivors. The Rockefeller school system was established not to enlighten, but to limit. Physics was rewritten to exclude the ether. History was compressed to fit a linear narrative of primitive to modern progress. We were taught that our ancestors burned whale oil, while they were likely manipulating fields of energy we are only just beginning to rediscover. We are a species with amnesia. We are essentially squatters living in the shell of a masterfully engineered estate. We occupy their buildings, we marvel at their acoustics, and we stare confusedly at their ornaments, but we have lost the user manual. The global wireless grid is hidden in plain sight, not because it is invisible, but because we lack the perception to recognize it. It stands silent, grounded, and cold, a Ferrari being pulled by a horse because the engine keys were thrown away.
There is a profound melancholy in realizing the magnitude of this theft. Imagine a timeline where this technology was allowed to flourish, a world without the geopolitical wars for oil, without the scarring of the earth for coal, without the monthly tribute paid to utility monopolies. That future didn't just fail to happen, it was actively intercepted. We are not at the peak of civilization. We are in a post-apocalyptic reboot, slowly trying to remember what we once knew. The greatest trick ever pulled was convincing the world that the past was primitive. By labeling these engineering marvels as merely religious or decorative, the controllers successfully hid the keys to the kingdom. They didn't need to hide the pyramids or the cathedrals, they just needed to change the definition of what they were. Once the function is forgotten, the object becomes harmless. It becomes a tourist attraction instead of a power plant. But the amnesia is starting to crack. The sheer survival of the physical evidence is their undoing. You can burn the books, you can rewrite the curriculum, but you cannot easily demolish every single piece of brick and copper across the globe. The grid remains. It is waiting. Every time you walk past a post office with a golden dome or a church with a metal spire, stop and look. Really look. Trust your eyes, not the plaque. The next time you feel a strange vibration touching an old stone wall or hear a hum in a silent cathedral, know that you are not imagining it. You are sensing the faint pulse of a dormant machine. The controllers rely on your ignorance to maintain their power. Break the spell. Share this knowledge, because if enough of us remember, perhaps we can finally find the switch to turn it back on. Until then, we walk among titans, oblivious to their thunder. We charge our phones with burning coal while standing in the shadows of towers built to harvest the stars. The global wireless grid of the 1800s isn't just a story about lost technology. It is a story about lost potential. It is the greatest inheritance ever denied to a civilization. They stole the sun from the sky and sold us back a candle.